I'm Scott Munn along with Tug Cowart in the Warrior Alliance Network studios in Atlanta, Georgia. PFC Hilbert Hibby Margol is here. He's 101 years young and a World War II hero. Hilbert Margol was born February 22, 1924 in Jacksonville, Florida. Both he and his twin brother Howard joined the ROTC in college with the intention to serve in the U.S. Army. The Margol brothers unit, the 42nd Infantry Rainbow Division, was sent into combat in France in January 1945. During the march to Munich, Germany on April 29, 1945, Private Margol and his brother were setting up their vehicle battery when they detected a terrible odor that they thought might be a chemical plant. Their commander gave the Margol brothers permission to investigate the area, and the two brothers discovered boxcars, bodies, and the gates of the concentration camp known as Dachau, under a German sign that read, "Work shall set you free." And their discovery led to awareness of the Holocaust and the liberation of 32,000 Jewish prisoners and other prisoners of war at Dachau alone. So today we'll introduce you to one of the greatest members of the greatest generation. Thank you for your service, sir, and thank you for preserving freedom. Hilbert Hibby Margol, welcome to the Warrior Alliance Network.
Thank you.
Gosh, such an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for being here. I can't imagine what it's like to have experienced the things that you have over the years. You said you're been married 76 years and 77 at the end of this year, and it's an honor to meet you. I can't imagine what it is that keeps you so active at 101 years old. You said you got a planned trip to Normandy, and then you have another trip.
Going back to Dachau,
yeah,
right?
So you got a lot of travel ahead of you. You said you got 2 weeks in between to regroup, to reboot, and just all that travel makes me tired thinking about it. Do you think there's something more that is giving you this platform to be able to go and talk to people like us and talk to others about what you did and what you saw, what you were able to accomplish and America was able to accomplish? Do you think that maybe there's a divine purpose for that?
Well, I've done over 200 presentations to various organizations, groups, churches, synagogues, and you name it, and a bunch of interviews. And I tell my story, and I enjoy telling it.
Yes, sir. Do you think there's a bigger purpose behind it? Because I, as a man of faith, I absolutely do.
Well, I just have said that I hope and pray that those who hear my voice, especially about what I witnessed at Dachau, outlive the offspring of the deniers.
Yes, sir.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's so impressive, I tell you. Does it ever weigh heavy on your mind? Because it seems like it would mine, being, discovering something. I mean, and I know it's very rewarding to know that you're able to do something so extraordinary. Does it ever get heavy thinking about it?
Well, there was nothing heroic about going into Dachau concentration camp. It was just a matter of curiosity.
Yes, sir.
Because everybody, it was early Sunday morning, April 29th, 1945. We were traveling on a 2-lane road and going to Munich, which was the next military objective. And we didn't really know anything about concentration camps, or very little. And the first thing we saw was a road sign. The largest sign said the word Dachau, referring to the town of Dachau, which was next door to, close by, the concentration camp. And one of our Jeep drivers came by and said there must be a chemical factory in the woods on the left side of the road, because we were on the right side, just a large enough clearing to accommodate our 4 105-millimeter howitzers. And everybody smelled a very strong odor. And one of our Jeep drivers came by and said there must be a chemical factory on the left side in the woods. My brother Howard came over to me because he was close by. He was a gunner on number 2, and I was a gunner on number 3. And he said, that very strong odor, he don't think it's a chemical factory. When we were kids, our mother used to go to a meat market, buy a freshly killed chicken. In those days, you had to buy the whole chicken. Take it home. She would hold it over the gas flame of the stove in the kitchen to burn off any remaining pin feathers. And he said, in doing so, it used to burn some of the skin and the fat of the chicken. He said, that's the odor it reminds him of. So I asked my gun sergeant, Tom Rogers, permission for Howard and I to go over there and determine what was the source of the strong odor. He could have said no, but he said, well, go ahead, but don't stay long because we don't know how long we're going to be at that position. So we took off. It took us maybe 10, 15 minutes to go through the woods. First thing we saw was a wide open area with a line of railroad boxcars. We crawled over between 2 boxcars, and the boxcar on our immediate right, the sliding door was open, as long as maybe 4 or 5 additional boxcars. And this particular one was unique because it had a dead prisoner's legs hanging out. And we had a little Brownie box camera we had liberated a couple of weeks earlier. The only film we had was what was inside the camera when we found it. So we decided to take a picture of that boxcar. And they were all deceased, crammed in like sardines, all clothed but all deceased, as well as some of the other boxcars. And then we noticed nearby was a 2-story building. In the middle was a gate. And we saw some other soldiers going through that gate, so we just went through the same gate. On the gate itself, it had the German words, Arbeit macht frei, which means work makes you free. So we walked through that gate, and it was a large open area. We saw a number of buildings to our right, and then we saw a bunch of buildings that looked like barracks buildings. We knew very little about such camps because they were not military objectives. So we later learned that there were over 32,000 prisoners inside the barracks, but we didn't see any of them because they were told the day before that later that Sunday the camp was going to be officially liberated, surrendered. So we looked around, and then we saw different places, stacks of deceased bodies, prisoners that were completely naked. We didn't understand what we were looking at. Why were they there? How did they get there? It sort of reminded us of maybe getting ready to make a Hollywood movie or something. There again, we later learned that months earlier, the Germans had run out of coal. Without coal, they could not operate the ovens. So that's what happened. And we went back there for the 70th anniversary, and we saw what was there, the actual room building where the room was where prisoners were told to disrobe to take a shower. Well, it really wasn't a shower, it was a gas chamber. And after they were deceased in a gas chamber, they moved the bodies into the next room where the 3 ovens were. And they were cremated, and that took care of that. But without coal, they couldn't operate. And that was pretty much the picture that we saw.
I know you went back there pretty soon after that initial discovery, and your unit participated in liberating 32,000 prisoners, Jews and Russian soldiers and everybody that the Nazis hated. What was that like to go back there and be a part of that? How did you participate?
Well, actually, the crematorium, hospital, was all located in the huge German Army SS training camp, which was next alongside the Dachau concentration camp. Those items were not in the prisoner camp. They were in the main German Army camp, because that much larger camp were SS officers. Some of them had their wives and children living with them there, and of course they knew what was going on and exposed to some of it. Every barracks, the Germans were very well organized. They didn't necessarily want to deal with the individual prisoners, so they appointed a prisoner for each barracks to really be in control of the barracks. Something like we used to have in this country in the prison system, where they had trustees that were prisoners that were treated better. They were treated better than the prisoners, got better food, better treatment, and the way it worked out, these so-called trustee prisoners, although they were referred to by a completely different name, they mistreated the prisoners to show the German soldiers who went with them on work details that they were helping them. And that curried their favor because they got better food, better treatment, and that's the way it worked.
When I went to the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., it's been about 5 years ago now, it's like nothing that I'd ever seen before in my life. There wasn't a word spoken among the many people that were there. You could have heard a pin drop. What was it like? Because I mean, I can't fathom what you saw. Were people just dumbfounded, like I was at the museum? I could not believe what I was seeing. Did it take time to wrap what was going on and what had happened? Kind of wrap your head around that?
Well, really, it was a different feeling entirely, because, and sometimes when I've talked to high school kids, they ask the question, how did you feel as a Jewish soldier seeing what you saw? And I said, well, before we got there, we had seen a lot of death and destruction.
Sure.
So it wasn't the first time
we saw unfortunately, right,
dead bodies. So, the first deceased soldier that you see, whether it was American or German, it's sort of an immediate shock. But then after that, you see more of them.
At what point did it become clear to you, or did you know about the depth of how much had happened? Was that a week after, months after, or even a year after? At what point did you realize how big what you had discovered was, and that it was part of a bigger process?
Well, it really took place over a period of years.
Okay.
As we got more information and so forth. Because, division headquarters, they knew about such camps and they had details. But the average soldier, we didn't know.
And Hibby, I read that Dachau was used as a prison for those SS officers once they were waiting to go to trial after the war, and then later used as a military installation for the Americans and Allies. Do you feel like that was appropriate? Were you guys proud that you sort of took it over and repurposed it?
Well, it's still there today. Mm-hmm. The German government destroyed the huge German army camp next door. But, and on the railroad tracks, they destroyed all that, because the first 3 or 4 cars of the railroad went inside the German army camp. That's how they got a lot of coal. That's how they got a lot of provisions by a train. They had a gate there, and they would open the gate and the first train would move right inside that camp. Had an incident there. The 45th, in combat, the 45th Division was always to our left. They came in that same day into the German Army camp. And first units that went in, the first 3 cars were open cars filled with dead bodies. And when some of the soldiers saw that, and then they took about, 40, 50 young German soldiers, Wehrmacht, and they took them to the coal yard, which had a concrete wall, and they lined them up like a firing squad, and they had a machine gun, and that's what they did. Only 2 or 3 of them survived the firing, and I have pictures of that.
Oh, goodness.
And that's what happened.
It's so important for people to hear this and to hear history, Tug. We'll forget it if we don't repeat these stories, and we're so glad that you're here today recording with us to keep this story alive so that everybody in the future can know what happened and we don't repeat it, right?
That's right. It deserves to be talked about, deserves to be discussed. It needs to be talked about and discussed.
And we're talking with Hibby Margol, a World War II hero, and his brother Howard, and he had been drafted while college students. In 1944, Howard was sent to the 104th Infantry Division in the Mojave Desert, and your brother was assigned to the 42nd Rainbow Division at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. And, we always hear about the band of brothers in World War II, but you guys actually were brothers who fought right alongside each other. You and your twins served in the same Army unit eventually, and we heard that your mother wrote a letter to the president asking for this to happen. Is that the truth? Is that how it happened?
Yes, Howard put in 3 requests for transfer to my unit in Oklahoma because the first 3 months when I got there, they put me in the infantry until they realized all my training was in the light artillery.
Mm-hmm.
So they moved me over to the artillery. Meanwhile, after 3 requests for transfer, he asked his captain what was the status of his transfer request. His captain told him, sorry, his job was to train him, not transfer him.
Mm.
The captain already knew that shortly after D-Day, the 104th Division was going to be the first division to go direct from the U.S. to France. And he didn't want to lose my brother Howard, highly trained soldier, to be replaced with some young kid fresh out of basic training. So he wrote a letter to our mother and told her what the situation was. She wrote a letter to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt saying she wanted us to serve together, which was against regulations at the time because the 5 Sullivan brothers months earlier had gone down in the Pacific on the same ship. So anyhow, she got a letter back from the White House about 2 weeks later saying as a 2-star mother, her request would be granted.
Wow.
Didn't say whether I was going to be transferred to him or he was coming to me. So then she got a second letter from the War Department basically saying the same thing. Finally, she got the 3rd letter from the division headquarters of the 104th Timberwolf Division saying that Howard was going to be transferred to 42nd Division where I was in Oklahoma. And that's how we managed to get back together again.
It's incredible. I know you've participated in a bunch of the trips back to Normandy through Delta Airlines to commemorate D-Day anniversaries, and you're going to be going back again this year. Veterans experience 12 days of celebration, remembrances, commemorations in honor of the liberation of France and Europe. What's this trip like for you? And I'm sure it's super important that you are there and a part of it.
Well, I went last year for the first time, which was a fantastic trip, simply because I was the first of 12 soldiers to receive the French Legion of Honor medal given to me by the French President Macron. And after I thanked him profusely, I told him that something I had told his wife earlier when we first arrived at Deauville, France, that her husband and I had one thing in common. And she said, "What's that?" He said the same thing. I said, "We both married beautiful women."
You got good eyes. Those eyes were good.
So, well, all the important people I met, I tried to tell them something I could think of to make them feel good.
Yes, sir.
So anyhow, and then after he pinned the medal on me and kissed me on both cheeks, President Biden of the United States was right behind him. He was momentarily distracted when his aide came to give him his medallion. So he only saw President Macron kiss me on the right cheek.
Okay.
He missed seeing him kiss me on the left cheek.
Yes, sir.
So after President Biden shook hands and gave me his medallion, he leaned over and kissed me on my right cheek. At the time, I was surprised, but I said I may be the only male person in history to be kissed by a sitting United States president.
I think you're probably right. No doubt about it. What an incredible experience it must have been, and what an honor to be there and to be celebrated for what the United States contributed to that war and what our men and women were able to do that wouldn't have been able to be possible without us being there. Can you tell me what you think about the Warrior Alliance and how they help veterans, and what advice you might have for veterans trying to find a purpose? Like you found your purpose after your service,
Right.
telling the story. What could you advise, or what advice could you give to veterans trying to find their purpose after service?
Well, returning to civilian life in those days was easy for a lot of us because we went back to college to finish up and had the GI Bill to help financially. Otherwise, I don't think we could have made it. But it was a lot cheaper in those days to go to college. But when you get back out of the service, even today, and you get some job or position doing something, do the same thing you did in the military. Do the absolute best job you can that you did, because work makes you free.
That's right.
And it leads to better things.
Yes, sir, it does. So impressive that you share that, and thank you, Scott.
And I know you've been spending time with the folks at the Warrior Alliance, and you appreciate what they're doing, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, right.
Yes, sir. And
Very much so.
And what can you tell us in general, just everybody, not just veterans, about how to live a long and happy life? What advice can you give to folks about that? I mean, 101 years old, that's something to aspire to.
101 years young. Right?
101 years young, that's correct.
Well, before I went to Normandy last year, I was invited to speak to the international school here in Atlanta.
Nice.
10-year-old kids. One of the kids asked a question: what did you do to be able to live to 100 at that time?
Mm-hmm.
And when we got to Normandy, went to a school of maybe 15-year-olds in a class that I was assigned to. One of the kids asked me the very same question. My answer was the same. I said, don't smoke growing up, don't do drugs, don't drink alcohol, but if you must, do it in very small amounts. And most important, hope and pray you get the best genes from your parents, because I got very fortunate. I got my mother's genes. She lived to 102.
Oh, wow.
And that's the best thing I could say.
Clean living and a little
That's
luck.
right. That's right. Absolutely.
We like it. But really, we just want to take a minute here to say thank you for bringing your family with you in today. We know you got your son and your daughter-in-law here, and we know your wife's listening at home. And really, don't you think it's about family support as well? Isn't family support good for long life as well? Having that wife that was dedicated to you all these years?
Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It's such a pleasure. God bless you.
Same to you.
There you go.
Perfect.
Now, I just want to make a couple corrections.
And before you do, I want to snip something in here and just say that we want to thank you for what you did for our country, but moreover, what you did for the world. I mean, you guys eliminated the biggest threat to freedom in the history of
Of mankind.
the planet.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. We can't thank you enough, but we're so grateful.
Well, you know, my personal opinion was most all of the military people in those days came through the Great Depression. You know, a lot of tough times, didn't have much, families didn't have a lot. So we were basically trained for tough times in combat, came in handy in combat. And that was pretty much it. And that was part of the deal.
Tough times create tough people.
Yeah.
And y'all were tough. Y'all are the toughest generation that's ever existed.
Well, you know, we were very fortunate in my unit because it was a total of 100 men in my gun battery. And we were only in actual combat a little over 4 months. And during that period, we were never more than a few feet or yards from our gun howitzer because we could get fire missions anytime, morning, noon, or night. And especially after it got dark, we would go into our sleeping bags and try and go to sleep. Because if the field telephone rang during the night, we automatically assumed it was a fire mission. We would immediately unzip our bags, jump out, and start the procedures of getting the gun ready and the ammunition ready. Each howitzer had 10 men, sergeant, corporal. I was a gunner, third in command, and then we had 6 more guys. One was a truck driver, and the other 6 guys were ammunition preparers. And through experience, we learned the fire missions. Once we heard the first one, we already knew what the second one would be, third one would be, and that's the way it was designed. In fact, I read after the war, the German army soldiers said they were amazed how fast the American artillery could fire projectiles.
Wow.
But we were so well trained.
I wonder, were you ever scared? Because it seems like in this overwhelming world war that is the greatest battles that the nation's ever fought and ever seen, the toughest generation to ever live. Was there ever a moment that you felt scared?
Well, I wouldn't say we were scared. We were prepared how to survive. And that was our concentration. We used to say, we're not concerned about the bullets that have your name on them, but we were concerned about those big ones that said, to whom it may concern.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
I love that you can have a sense of humor about it.
Me too. I think that's the most appealing part of this conversation is the fact that you're able to laugh in the face of pure evil. I mean, you faced evil as a man, as an army, as a country. You faced evil on this earth, and you're still able to walk away victorious. First of all, back-to-back World War champions, I'd like to point out, for the United States. And then you're able to laugh. You're still able to have a sense of humor, and I think that
well, during
amazing.
Combat, we had a couple of times we had rest periods, either a day or 2 day, 1 or 2 days rest period, because the 3 divisions, 45th, I said, was to our left, 36th Texas Division was always to our right. So there was always either 2 or 3 of the divisions that were actually moving ahead. And one division would get a day here, 2 days, and that's the way it worked. And I remember when we captured Würzburg, and we never set up our howitzers inside any city, town, or village. We were always on the outskirts. Behind the infantry guys directly in front of us, they were the ones that were inside cities, towns, villages being delayed or held up by German soldiers. So we were sometimes close together, sometimes our howitzers were quite a distance apart. But at Würzburg, after Würzburg was under control, we never went inside the city, but our truck driver and one supply driver drove their trucks closer in, and they saw some warehouse buildings, and they went into one of the warehouse buildings, and they saw cases of French champagne, other cases of miniature jugs of different fruit brandies. So they loaded as many cases of the champagne and fruit brandies on the 2 vehicles as they could, brought them back to the gun section. We had 5-gallon water cans. Purpose of the water cans was, number one, drinking, and then after every so many missions, we had to wash out the gun bores to get rid of any remaining powder residue. So we emptied out most of the 5-gallon water cans, because whenever we were able to get more water, we had to put chlorine tablets in the water before we could drink it. Tasted awful. But so we emptied them out and poured the champagne into the water cans. Much better drinking.
That's what I bet.
And we felt it did a better job of cleaning out the gun bores as well.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
And it was wintertime, so the champagne was chilled just from,
There you go.
from the air.
I love that.
And so for about 2 weeks, we drank champagne every day.
Goodness. I don't think I've ever been told that one.
Well, in the Army, they tell you to prehydrate and rehydrate, and you
Yes.
followed orders. That's all it is.
Well, and I can tell you this, of the 100 men and a few officers, about 90 of them start drinking the different,
The brandies?
the brandies, different brandies, apple brandies, cherry brandies, and whatnot. And they thought, most of them thought it was fruit punch. They didn't know it had alcohol in it, and they got drunk.
Oh, no.
Oh, man.
We had one 18-year-old replacement that we had just recently got direct from basic training. He was drunk, and when we had a day and a half of rest, that's when we saw the kitchen crew. They came and cooked us a hot meal.
There you go.
Nice.
So he didn't like what they cooked. So he was waving his carbine rifle, looking for the mess manager. He wanted to shoot him.
Oh, no.
So
Wow.
we grabbed him and took away his rifle, put him in his sleeping bag and zipped him up
There you go.
until he got sober.
That's right.
You policed your own. I guess, so now you know from what you're talking about when you tell kids not to drink, because you saw
You
it
saw
firsthand.
firsthand. One of many things that you were able to see firsthand. Gosh, we could talk to you for the rest of the day. Hibby,
Yeah.
thank you for everything you've done for our country. Thank you for everything you've done for the world. May God bless you and God be with you every day.
Thank you.